Hey everybody, welcome to Dad Talk today. We are in Rapid City, South Dakota at Freedom Fest 2021, and I'm sitting here with Houston County Sheriff, Mr. Randy Hargrove. Randy, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Doing all right. So Randy, how you enjoying yourself so far?
Well, we've been really busy. There's a lot of things to see and do. We just got finished up with the sheriff's panel, constitutional sheriff's panel, I might add, and it went really great. Had good response. So, hey, we're looking for a big turnout here.
You know, I sat down and talked to Sheriff Richard Mack yesterday. It was one of the best interviews that I've had, and he started talking about some of the horrors that he had seen going on with CPS.
Yes.
And we had a little bit of a conversation earlier, and I personally asked you to come on and speak about this because we got to get some awareness going on. But Randy, what are some of the things you've seen going on with CPS?
Well, right now, I've been in this business about 24 years, going on 25, and I've seen an influx of people coming in and coming out as far as CPS workers, and we've had a bunch, and we've had some really great ones, and we've had some really not so great ones, but that's just people for you. And I think a lot of it has to do, we need people so bad that we may lower our standards just a little bit in vetting and in training and stuff like that, because we need them so bad. We got to get them through the course and get them trained and get them out there working. And I think we fail to really equip them like we need to. And I think it comes back to the bottom line. You got to have good people. And I'm not saying the people that are in there are not good, because there are some very excellent CPS people. But they're inundated also. They're inundated with kids. The failure of the family unit, where you have mom and 6 kids and you don't know where the dad is or how many dads there is, and then you have the budget constraints like we have. Actually, in Texas with CPS, they need workers so bad that the CPS workers are having to keep those kids in their homes and watch them.
Right.
And so we're not getting the volunteers, we're not getting the foster parents like we had. People are just not stepping up like they were. And you know, some of it may be because of COVID and budget restraints, et cetera. But we've been doing this a long time, and over the years, I think CPS is hurting, and I don't know what the answer is, just to tell you the truth. Other than we've got to change the way we train, we have to change. And you can't, you know, and I made a statement a while ago, and I want to clarify that. I said we had some really great ones, and we've had some that's not so great. Maybe the ones that aren't so great, we didn't give them the proper training they needed.
I've heard that a lot.
You know, so I guess the fault lies in a big area, but our kids are the ones suffering.
You know, Randy, I've had several discussions with a former CPS worker from your area, and I don't want to get into numbers because I can't exactly remember, but I remember him telling me there was like 3 of them that had this huge area.
Oh, yeah.
And he was like, there was no way we could cover it. And he said we'd be a month or 2 behind on calls.
Yeah.
And he said when we get it, we was always being pressured, get this case closed, get this case closed.
That's it.
So they had to overlook it. And he said a lot of times they was overlooking cases that needed help.
That's exactly right.
And the ones that didn't need help were the ones that was getting the attention.
I have seen that very thing. You know, I've seen bewildered parents. We get a lot of calls for CPS on divorces. You know, the husband get mad at the wife get mad at the husband, and call CPS. Well, he's doing this to the kids, or she's doing that to the kids. That ties up a lot of resources when they could be working where they really need to be working.
Let me ask you some of that though, Randy. So if the husband or the wife or the exes, okay, they're using this as a weapon against the other one just because they was mad, if they were found to be making these false allegations just to stir it up, just to get someone in trouble, shouldn't there be some consequences to that?
Sure, you bet.
You know, and I know a lot of times it's supposed to be perjury, but we see inside a family court, somebody can make any allegation they want. This person is guilty until proven innocent, and if they can fight off that allegation, there's no consequences for the accuser.
That's right.
And where there's no consequences, we see what we got now.
That's right.
You know?
I had one kind of like that. I had a family that was split up. The mom called and said the dad had been molesting the child, the daughter. So I got the case myself and I worked it. And I said, well, I tell you what, I said, asked the dad, I said, how about taking a polygraph? He said, sure. So he went with me and we took a polygraph and he passed it. And the examiner said, you got to go back to work.
Right.
So I went back to work and I told the mom, I said, look, he passed it. Now everybody's thinking you're making it up. She said, I'm not making it up. Took her and polygraphed her and she passed it. And so I asked the polygrapher, I said, what do you think the deal is? And he said, you remember in the report, it said that the aunt told the mom that that was going on. So that's why she passed, because she didn't make it up. Maybe the aunt made it up. But anyway, it went away.
That is so crazy, man.
And it wasted a lot of resources. A lot of resources. I had to travel from Crockett to Houston, Texas with both of those individuals and back, and on 2 different times. And that's just a lot of resources we waste on those kind of cases where someone gets mad at somebody, and it ties up our Child Protective Services cases where they don't have time to spend on the really serious cases.
Right. And we was talking to Richard yesterday. It's been very well known that the CPS in his area, I think, is one of the most out of hand CPSs that we've got in this country. They talk about these kids that are being taken away from their parents that don't need to be, but now they end up in the adoption industry.
Right.
Money's made back out of the adoption, and CPS is starting to get their hands involved in what looks like human trafficking.
Right, yeah.
What can we, I know you might not have seen this in your area, Randy, you might have.
Right.
But what can we as people, I know like you as law enforcement, you got a budget, you got so many people you can do. It's hard for you to step outside of what you're doing to change the system. You're there to enforce. What can we as parents do to come together and raise our voices to get some awareness on this and to get some change?
Just that, and you're right. It stretches our resources. We have to prioritize our calls, and that right there is a major problem, because when you first get that CPS call, you don't know if it's the real thing or not. So you have to go ahead and get busy. If you don't, you're losing time. When you lose time, you lose evidence and that sort of thing. People change their stories, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a big problem. It's got to go back to the family, and it's got to go back to teaching, parents teaching their kids. It's got to go back to the basics. We've got a runaway train, and I'm not sure we can stop it, but we got to try. It goes back to the fundamentals of families, the spiritual side of family. Getting your kids in church and teaching them who God is, teaching them about motherhood and fatherhood. But we've just gotten completely away from that, and it's a real issue. We've gotten away from the basics of why we're here, and that's one of the problems that we face.
Sheriff, I can feel your heart. A lot of these parents that have been through these CPS issues, they're very angry. A lot of them have rights to be angry. CPS was made for a very good reason. We see some horrendous cases that these children are going through, and I can't imagine what we would do if it wasn't for CPS. There's a lot of calls to abolish CPS.
Right.
But there will be people that have watched the show, I see it all the time, and they'll say, well, if the sheriff's seeing this, why aren't we arresting them? Why aren't we doing this?
Right.
Tell everybody a little bit behind the scenes of how your hands are tied when it comes to these issues, and why it really falls back on us, the parents, to make sure this is going on.
So many times it comes back to evidence when you talk about arresting people and making cases for court. Many times you have he said, she said. You have no physical evidence. It happened years ago. So what you end up seeing is a case going to court based upon the interview of the child. At our center it's called Caitlin's Center, and they take them there, they interview them, they ask them questions. It's a whole lot different than asking questions in a criminal case.
Right.
And you do all that, and then you have to make a decision. The courts have to make a decision. The prosecutors do, whether or not to even take that to court based upon that. He said, she said. It's a very difficult situation. And again, it takes a lot of time. Just one, for instance, I worked a case when I first got into law enforcement where a little girl lived with her grandparents. And the grandmother got cancer, and it was terminal. She was going to die. And so they sold their home, and they were trying to sell their home. They bought a motorhome, and they were going to travel before she died and enjoy what little life they had left. the granddaughter didn't want to go back to her mom, so she made up a story against her grandfather to keep that from happening. And this is one thing that can be done, and it's on that level is what I did. I did my best on that investigation, and I dug deep, and I found out that it was a made-up story. And I went ahead and took it to grand jury, and got that man no bill so he could save face. And the girl was too young. The 14-year-old, they're not going to do anything with it.
Right.
But so sometimes we just need to go that extra mile in doing these cases, investigating these cases to make sure that we're not making a mistake. And if it's questionable, use the grand jury. You got 12 people looking at the case instead of just a couple.
Well, I think you brought up a really good point. You know, you got the he said, she said, and there's a lot of that. You got to have evidence. Guys, if you don't have evidence, even if you know good and well in your mind that this person probably is guilty, when it goes in front of that court, they're going to want to see that evidence. And Randy, maybe you can speak to this. Sometimes even if you got the evidence, it doesn't go through.
That's correct.
You know?
And then from there, when if you do have hard evidence, and sometimes it may be just not a good case.
Yeah.
And sometimes maybe the officer investigating it just didn't do a really good job. I mean, that happens. I've been there before in my early years.
We make mistakes.
We make mistakes. We need more training. And then sometimes maybe the prosecutor had a bad day. I don't know. Maybe you got a bad jury, you know, when you pick those 12 to listen to that case. So there's a lot of factors. And so to me, that tells me how important it is for the first investigating officer to do his homework and get all the evidence, get all the statements he can get, and then go forward to that thing, see where it takes him.
You know, Randy, on the way out, I just want to say I have so much respect for our law enforcement, and I know it hasn't been easy over the past couple of years. They really came and brought attacks towards our men and women that are fighting for this country, and I couldn't imagine what it's like to be inside you guys' shoes. Yeah. But to know that you guys are out there fighting, trying to keep the peace, and they're out there to protect us. And you know, I think people forget that the conversations like we're having right now are so critical. And even though we know that there might be a problem with the system, okay, to be able to sit down and talk to people, sheriffs like you, like Richard, it means the world to us, and that brings solutions to the table, believe it or not. So I want to thank you so much for your service.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for this interview.
You bet. Have a good day.
Hey everybody, Eric Carroll here. Thank you for tuning in to another exciting episode of Dad Talk Today. While we fight for you, we would ask for you to please help fight for us. Like, subscribe to our channel, and ring that bell so you get notifications every time we go live. There's also super chats, patreon.com/dadtalktoday, and other ways you can support our channel. Thank you for being here, and we will see you next time.